Munira Ahmed, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Now, tell us all how this happened. You became a very well-known face that appeared in a photograph and then ultimately on a poster and then in all the different ways that photographs and messages using photographs transform themselves. How did it originally happen, and then what happened after that?
Sure. So the original photo was actually shot in 2007. And it was just an image that I was the subject of for a publication called Illume magazine. Illume was a small publication, I believe, that was based in the Bay Area. And the photographer for that image, his name was Ridwan Adhami. And Ridwan, had asked me if I felt comfortable, being the subject for this image. He and I knew of each other, and I think we had also worked together for a campaign streetwear local boutique in Queens, which is where we are both from. I thought about it a little bit.
Had you been a model, or had you been someone who was in a lot of photo shoots prior to that?
I actually did in college. I was a full-time college student, and that was something at the time as a kind of a side hobby I got into a little bit. I had a lot of friends who were very talented makeup artists, quite a few who were dabbling in photography, and thought, if I'm free and another model of theirs happened to fall through from an agency, they just would ask me, would you be, available and interested in being a subject for.
So in this case, you thought about it and you said, okay, I'll do it. And then what happened?
Yeah, right. I mean, sometimes, it just seemed like what better time than now, since I'm not working, I'm in school, and I've been at that time also approached a lot, told I'm photogenic. And I started to sort of see it as well. I was like, okay, I kind of look way better in pictures than I do in person. So maybe there's something to that. So at that time, I took some pictures with some people whose work I admired. I did actually, work with Ridwan on more than one shoot. And this one happened to be for a specific purpose. It was for the Illume magazine. And they were a magazine based in San Francisco, like I said, and they had used his work a lot for prior issues to shoot the cover image, and they were often kind of like a controversial, abstract. And he told me what the concept for this one was. I believe at that time, the New York Stock Exchange building down by Wall Street had a huge American flag draped over it, and the initial idea for how we would frame this image was I would be in a foreground wearing a flag as a hijab. And the background of the image would be the New York Stock Exchange with the building and the flag in view. And that image was one of the composites, but then when we saw the one that we initially, or eventually rather, went with, it seemed more striking to him, and I think also to the publisher for the magazine. They decided this one would be far more compelling to use, and so they did. And then it began to live online. And during this time, I don't know if the word viral is correct to use, but it kind of took a life on its own, and started to become widely circulated with Muslim bloggers, think pieces, Facebook posts. So this image, just the photo itself, kind of took a life of its own and became kind of, even people didn't know either myself or Ridwan. It just sort of kind of came back around to us quite often, and people would tag me in the comments when they would see a very popular semi-viral Facebook post using that image, and then they would ask me in the comments, hey, is this you? Or they would say, wait, this is that picture of you that you shot a couple years ago. Look where it's popping up now. And every time I would see it, I would just feel that I have to tag Ridwan and let him take a look at how it's being used in case he wanted to contact anybody to, ask for credit. I don't think he ever really did that though. I think he just like let it be. And
Well, it
so
became it became a photo that sort of had a political message. And I mentioned sort of the face of the resistance. And I know the resistance, can be whatever you want it to be, and it takes many forms. But I guess in response to the Muslim ban and what was seen as sort of a demonization of Muslim communities in America, this particular image was used sort of in resisting that general political agenda that was seen by as part of the Trump administration.
Yeah. No, I mean, so that initial image, like I said, was shot in 2007. We had no idea that 10 years later, who this country would choose as its leader, and what a divisive time we'd be living in. And we thought it was bad then. Trust me, we did, because this is a couple years after 9/11 happened, and 1 or 2 years prior to all the controversies surrounding what was being called the Ground Zero Mosque. I don't know if you recall that whole incident, but
sure.
It was just a lot happening. I'm a native New Yorker. I was born and raised in Queens, New York. I went to high school in Brooklyn. I actually attended Brooklyn Tech, which was right across the river, the East River, from downtown Manhattan. So I had, a much closer proximity to the events of 9/11 unfolding literally right as I was in my first period class that day, which was my senior year journalism class. And it impacted me so much as a New Yorker, and obviously I know, a lot of friends who became parentless that day or lost a loved one. Many of the workers of the restaurant on the top floor of Tower 1, which is called Windows of the World,
yep,
were Bangladeshi workers, servers, busboys. So, and my community was impacted very much so. And I specifically know that there were first responders who were Muslim who died that day. So when I started to hear about people and the backlash against Muslims, specifically the rhetoric around how it would be disrespectful for there to be a house of worship or something like a Muslim community center or something of that nature shouldn't exist in proximity to Ground Zero because it would be disrespectful to the victims' families. Those are the kind of things that made me very upset to hear. And when I would and could educate people on how that is very polarizing and inflammatory and not true, it just felt like it would exhaust me to no end to continue to explain to people that keep saying, oh, there's always silence from the Muslim community whenever something like this happens, and that's also just not true. And I think they're choosing to be deaf to when we speak out against those things.
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear you talk about it and how it touched you personally in New York. And as a Bangladeshi American, you had no idea even back then in 2007 that it would sort of morph into this thing that would then in a way become super relevant when Donald Trump was elected president.
Unfortunately.
And just in our limited time, I wanted to touch on the hijab, because from my understanding, you didn't even know, because in the photo you're wearing this hijab, as we say, that's an American flag, but you didn't wear a hijab, did you?
No. So I consider myself a person who is a spiritual practitioner of Islam, and always have been. And in my family, at least at the time, a lot of the devout women in my family didn't cover their hair, and it wasn't just something that was practiced by us. Some of the women in my family do cover their hair now, but it's not imposed on us. And in my personal interpretation of the verses in the Quran that speak about women's dress and modesty, I believe I follow that. And I believe that it's not an obligation. personal obligation, but I do respect the choice that women make to have that as part of their everyday garb. I wear a covering for my hair when I attend the mosque. I wear a covering for my hair when I am part of a religious function. And during prayer, obviously, I wouldn't never have my hair uncovered, but it is not part of my everyday garb.
Is it true, and we only have just a minute left, so I'm sorry, I have so many sort of fragments of questions for you. Is it true that you had a ticket to the inauguration, the presidential inauguration?
It came into my possession the night before. I arrived in Washington, D.C., and
this is to the Trump inauguration. You had
right. So there were so many people that didn't want to go, or just tickets were up for grabs, and I think we saw how empty it was, even though they're saying that those pictures are fake. They're not fake, and people didn't really care to go, even though they were in D.C. So there were people literally handing them out, and I was just giving it to someone who was in D.C. And picked me up from the Amtrak station from Amplifier. So the Amplifier organization, which commissioned Shepard Fairey and collaborated with him to create the images, the poster versions, which are the popular versions we see of the image now. They, the person from Amplifier who picked me up happened to have it in his possession, and he just left it kind of for me to.
It's a great story.
It's yours.
It's a great story. I just love that as sort of a coda to everything. But your work continues. I know you didn't expect it simply by becoming a part of this poster and this image, and as you say, Shepard Fairey's reconstituting that photo, but you've become sort of a spokesperson, and you've done some heavy lifting on your own. I'd love to continue this conversation another time. Munira, congratulations on everything, and I should mention that you have a crowdfunding link for the Resistance Revival Chorus, which is a musical group that you are part of. You're an active member, and you're raising funds to complete mixing and mastering your first album. And you can see the website there, resistancerevivalchorus.com. So Munira, thank you so much again for joining us. I wish you all the very best on all your many endeavors.
Thank you so much.
You're lovely to spend some time with us.
Thanks for watching this free clip of the Young Turks. Don't forget to become a TYT member today. For more exclusive content, join now at tyt.com/join.